President Trump has widened the global trade war he started since retaking the White House. He's announced a 25% tariff on all cars imported into the United States from the 2nd of April. The US president claimed the measures would spur growth in the US car industry and create jobs and investment. The US imports roughly 8 million cars. That was last year's number, accounting for about $240 billion in trade and roughly half of overall sales. Mexico is the top foreign supplier of cars to the US, followed by South Korea, Japan, Canada and Germany. Analysts estimate that 25% tariffs on car parts from Mexico and Canada could add between $4,000 and $10,000 in costs, depending on the vehicle.
This will continue to spur growth like you haven't seen. Before I was elected, we were losing all of our plants that were being built in Mexico and Canada and other places. Now those plants largely have stopped and they're moving them to our country. In Indiana, the great state of Indiana, I love Indiana. Honda is building one of the biggest plants anywhere, and they've just started. They wouldn't have done it without this. In all cases, they wouldn't have done it without what we're doing.
Well, there's been a response from Europe, with the EU promising to protect its workers and consumers. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, said, "I deeply regret the US decision to impose tariffs on European automotive exports." She went on to say tariffs are taxes, bad for businesses, worse for consumers, equally in the US and in the European Union. Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney called the tariffs a direct attack on Canadian workers and vowed his country would rebound on its own.
We will build an all-in Canada network for auto manufacturing components. Because on average, an auto part crosses that border, often through that bridge, over that bridge, 6 times before final assembly. And in a trade war, that's a huge vulnerability.
Well, let's bring in Rufus Yerza, who's former US trade negotiator and former Deputy Director General of the World Trade Organization. Welcome to BBC News.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, first of all, your initial reaction, the impact this will have.
Well, this is really the first major battle of the trade war. We might say the preliminaries are over. Things seemed on again and off again on many aspects of what Trump was threatening. But now, clearly, he's determined to go forward. I'm not surprised that he's chosen autos. This has been something he's talked about for a long, long time. But the reason it's so major, this is, a $4 trillion industry worldwide. It's one of the largest segments of manufacturing and assembly in all of the developed economies of the world. The trade is very vibrant. The U.S. imported, as you said, about $240 billion of cars. But this new action extends also to auto parts, and there's about $192 billion more of auto parts that are caught up in this. And of course, as you said, the 5 biggest exporters to the U.S., Mexico, Japan, Korea, Canada, and Germany, but also other European countries like the UK itself, France, and Italy. And so this is now a trade conflict between the U.S. and its traditional allies and partners, both in free trade and in democracy. Clearly, it's going to have major repercussions for the relationships between these countries. I think retaliation of some sort is going to be inevitable. And it's going to have a major impact on these economies as well as the U.S. economy. And we can talk about what those impacts are.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, when pressed by reporters on whether this was a negotiating tactic, the president said, no, this is permanent. This will not change. Comes into effect next week. We've seen reaction, we've mentioned, from Ursula von der Leyen, from Mark Carney, but also from Japan as well. Interesting, Japan's take on this was, we invest so much in the US economy where they have factories, etc. I mean, that is the long-term goal of the president. Will he achieve that? More manufacturing in the US, growth, more jobs for Americans.
Well, but it's also going to raise costs significantly for U.S. producers because they depend on global supply chains and a very, very sophisticated network of integrated production, particularly among the North American partners. So this will have a big impact on Canada and Mexico. And if their economies start taking a downturn, that's bound to have an impact on the U.S. as well. But in terms of, one of the things we're going to see down the road is how much of an inflationary impact will this have? There are estimates now that it will increase the cost of a car in the U.S. Average car is about $50,000. It'll increase that to somewhere close to $60,000.
Okay.
And, just at a time when obviously Americans were expecting their new president to bring down costs.
All right.
And
we've got to leave it there, Rufus. Sorry to interrupt you, but we do appreciate your analysis on this. There is so much more to say, though, as you are implying, Rufus Yasha there. But if we unpack this further later in business, markets have reacted to this. We've seen car stocks falling in the US and in Asia as well. We'll have more on that later.